It was like a game of chicken. Who's going to say hi first?
How are you?
I'm doing splendidly.
Splendidly.
Yeah.
I am feeling fabulous. That sounds weird.
I love it when people use flowery words when asked how they're doing.
I mean, as long as they're honest, I'm all up for it.
Right. But most people aren't honest, so I don't always expect that. Like, I would prefer honesty, but when people use flowery words, it just wakes me up a little bit in life. Like I remember one kid in my high school, someone was like, "How are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm excellent." And I just remember being, that's not super flowery, but I remember that he switched it up instead of being like, "I'm good." And I was like, I like knowing that this guy's excellent right now.
But what if he says that every day? Then it's as fake as good.
Right. I know. Most people are fake when they say how they're doing, unless they're feeling really honest and real and they want to get into it.
I do feel good often when they say I'm good, but
Same.
Yeah. I mean, when the thing is, like, it's more like of a social habit to say like, how are you? But people aren't actually asking you. They're just the words that come after hello that they don't actually want to hear. If you say, I'm not feeling great, I'm pretty sure most people would be like, okay, bye.
It's like a nice exchange to keep it less detailed, or like a social exchange or a nicety. But I do like working in mental health because a lot of times people will answer honestly, which I love.
Oh, yeah. And clients love it when I ask, how are you doing? They're like, yeah, fine. And I was like, well, how are you really doing? And then it's like, oh, she's actually asking me. It's like, yes, I'm actually asking you.
That's always nice. Like the follow-up, like double check. Yeah.
Also, I feel like when someone double checks in real life, it's sort of how they tell you that they truly want to know, right? Like someone doesn't ask twice if they actually are just asking because it's the dance that you do when you meet someone. You're like, hello, how are you? And then you move on. When they ask twice, they're showing their genuine interest. And so I feel like that's also true in the wild, not just in coaching sessions.
I love that. Yeah. What are we talking about today?
Distractions.
I was actually distracted by that conversation.
So we got a question on what is a good distraction and is distraction always good?
Let's start with the second question first.
Yes, indeed. Because let's be real, we're going to get probably sidetracked into something else when we start talking about examples. So we should probably start with the first part. So Meg, tell me, is distraction always good?
I wish I could say yes, but it's definitely not always good, because there is a fine line of, if you lean on distraction all the time, it turns into avoidance of the things you actually need to be feeling and facing and maybe processing. So distraction, I find, can be really helpful to get through maybe something difficult. So in eating disorder recovery, like maybe you're adjusting to a different meal plan, and maybe watching a favorite YouTube video might be a really good distraction for you to get through eating, right? Like that's a really good example. But like if you are, feeling really a heavy emotion about something, maybe you have the urge to use a behavior. Sometimes distraction could be avoidance in the fact that you're not allowing yourself to feel the feelings and use a coping skill instead. I don't really know if I explained that clearly, but yeah.
So I like what you said. And the way that I look at it, generally speaking, is, in order to know, am I distracted or am I just avoiding? My question is more to say, are you allowing yourself to move forward at some point? Because sometimes distraction is a coping skill, actually, because like you said, it can be something that we do in the same time as we do something else that is hard. And so because we don't want that other part of our mind to sort of come in really loudly and hijack and make that not feasible, we basically distract ourselves at the same time so that we can move forward.
Yes.
What can also be true is that we are facing a hard moment. And in this moment, we either use a behavior or we distract because we can't yet do something about it. Whether that is because we don't have the tools and the skills yet, or simply because it's just not something that we can do something about. I find that distraction is, again, a good tool because if the alternative is using a disordered behavior, clearly that's not getting you anywhere. And it doesn't come with, I will never look at it again. It comes with, I will look at it when I am able to look at it, or I will come back to this when I am, I don't know, in a more neutral space. Maybe when I have calmed down, maybe when I have someone else with me that can help me out with this, right? And so in this sense, it might be like a version of avoidance, but it's temporary avoidance in order to get someone into a space where they're safe and they can be helped out, or they can reach for something else that they need. And I'm going to jump into like an example for myself, but I remember in recovery where sometimes I would be flooded by typically feelings, my kryptonite. And my only two options were distract or use a behavior. I was clearly not feeling the feelings, but I wasn't saying no to them. I was saying later. And so my responsibility was to say, pause. I know that if I let this come in, I know that me saying later means that it's going to be a bigger wave. I know that. And I know that I still have the responsibility of looking at it later. But clearly right now is not the right moment because I don't know, I'm at work. I'm in the, I don't know, for a bunch of different reasons, it might just not be the right place, time, situation, or maybe I wanted to have my partner with me or whatever. And so in that sense, distraction was also a tool.
Can I jump in?
Yes, I'm
realizing the nuance here. The nuance is consciousness of what you're doing and making conscious choices. So avoidance is really not having the consciousness that you are avoiding. Like when people are avoiding, they're typically not necessarily aware that they're avoiding necessarily. They're like going through life using behaviors or just numbing themselves. Whereas distraction is a conscious tool that you take in and use when you're in recovery. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think avoidance can be both conscious or unconscious. But when it comes to, for example, the example of the feeling thing, this is where unconsciously you could be avoiding by using distraction and not realizing that you're just making it worse for yourself.
Yeah.
So I can see how that could be very much unconscious and shooting yourself in the foot, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think making the choice to distract is when it is positive for recovery versus when you haven't really brought in that awareness necessarily that that's what's happening.
Yeah. Or, I mean, to be fully honest, I was sometimes very aware that I was making the wrong choices in recovery. Okay. So
yeah.
So I just need to put myself out there and be like, you know what? Sometimes I was 100% aware that I was just being like, you know what? I'm going to slide into that. But, I do think that for a while, it was mostly unconscious and being like, no, I'm using distraction. And it's like, no, you're avoiding, you're not distracting here. But that being said, I really, really want to know what your favorite distraction techniques are.
Well, if we're thinking about distractions, I would say my number one is listening to podcasts. By far. And if I really need a distraction, it will be comedy podcasts. So that's probably it. And then maybe entrepreneurial podcasts so I can get into the aspirational, inspirational mode. But usually comedy, specifically comedy podcasts, also drag queens on YouTube. Really fun for me. Those are
Was that already true in recovery?
Was that true in recovery? No, recovery was a totally different ballgame. I think my distraction back then was calling people on the phone.
Mm-hmm. See, I think in terms of efficiency of, method, the talking to someone else was the best
Yes.
for me at the time too, because you can't just at some point be like, okay, shush, I'm going to start using behaviors, or, you know what I mean? Like if you're talking to them, you're engaged, you're present, you're listening. Of course, you can still start like disconnect. But if you're with someone, especially if they know what you're going through, they can really keep you in the conversation maybe. So I definitely liked the speak to someone distraction in the past.
Yeah. And when you speak to someone, it's immediately breaking of the current state you're in.
Mm.
So if you're in your head and you pick up the phone and you hear someone's voice who says, hello, how are you? It breaks that state almost immediately. It's like the fastest way to get out of your head and more redirected into the present, right? Because then you can focus on that person and how they are doing and kind of pull yourself back into, like, I don't know, normal life, the present.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it really depended on who and what am I trying to distract from in terms of whether or not that was the right technique, because I'm very good at being in a conversation and being in a conversation with myself at the same time in my head. And so I knew that there is like different levels of overwhelm and overthinking and monkey mind going on that would indicate, should I go and talk to someone now, or do I need an in between? Because, when you said, that thing where like it disrupts like basically the loop that's going on.
Yeah.
I sometimes need it like that to a very physical sense. So like grounding techniques, like splashing cold water on your face, washing your hands. I know you like holding ice cubes. I hate that concept, but you do
That's
it.
only when I'm in like super crisis mode, which
Okay. So those ones in recovery, I would sometimes need because it was too like fast or too like all encompassing, I guess, for me to sort of come up to someone and have a conversation without still being in my head.
Yeah, I totally see that. Like you need that interim, you need the grounding piece first,
Mm-hmm.
and then the distraction through the phone call.
Yeah. Or two things at the same time. Like,
yeah, those are the best. Oh my God. I love these. This is like the life hack when you do the cognitive distraction and the physical distraction at the same time. So it's like doing a puzzle. Like you're cognitively focused on like the puzzles and how they fit together, but then you're physically touching the pieces and moving them around. And I love it. Nothing more grounding and distracting than the duo.
Podcast and Sudoku, for example. TV show you always like to watch and you already know all the episodes, put that on the screen plus, I don't know, a word search at the same time. Because the thing that will capture part of your brain that sort of captures your attention and it sort of takes out the static in your head. Right, and then you're busy doing something else. So like the combo, like of the cognitive and the physical, chef's kiss, like so efficient.
I think if you are the kind of person who turns to exercise as your maladaptive coping skill, I like the double thing too, because usually it involves the hands and fidgeting and doing something with your hands, like knitting or painting or arts and crafts or something, collaging, which we're doing in the collective today, by the way. All of those things, like I find if you're moving even in a smaller way, it can settle down that need to like move, right? You can, fidgeting is really helpful.
Intuitive dancing, if you want to, pick a song you really like. It's going to feed your little ears with music. You're going to be able to maybe like have a little wiggle. I don't know. Favorite. Why are you laughing? Is my wiggle very weird?
A little wiggle.
You know what I mean.
How you
dance? Exactly like that.
My interpretive dance of little wiggle.
So you can dance like that, or well, how about shaking?
Oh God, don't get me to shake.
Why not?
because it'll look like I'm convulsing or something.
It's like, I can see that you're picking and choosing what you're showing to our subscribers. That is not good.
Shake, shake, shake.
But
okay,
I definitely do like the physicality of a distraction can be really helpful to ground yourself back in the present moment. Now, currently, I will say I quite like putting a podcast that I really enjoy, a new episode, so that it sort of like takes my attention, and going on a gentle walk in nature, because we know that there are a lot of benefits to that. But that was something that I had to pause in recovery, as in, it's not that I had to pause it. It's just that it was not an option because I needed to address my over-exercise habits. And so I couldn't have that on the menu. And so if that's something that you're considering or doing, make sure that you're checking in with yourself and your treatment team about how much of an adequate distraction method that actually is for you.
Yes, I love that reminder because I think movement can be really healthified and it's connected to the ED. And I think people also connected to like, well, this just relieves my anxiety to be walking. And it's not really that intense, but at the end of the day, walking is
movement.
Yeah. We have a whole video on that somewhere.
We do. Now, the reason that at the time, like for a certain amount of time, I was really attracted to that conceptually, because I liked the idea of being outside of where it is that I'm feeling activated, triggered, or overwhelmed. And so this idea of sort of like going out of, for example, where I was living, or out of the office or something that had that appeal to it. If that's the case, try to find a different version of that. Sometimes it can be opening the window and like, breathing some fresh air, going in a different room in your house or apartment, depending also on what it is that your eating disorder might be suggesting in terms of behaviors. That might also help you figure out what is the best physical location to be in, or the best, technique to use. And what I mean by that is, let me give you a typical example. If you're thinking, well, I need to purge, for example, maybe a good idea is to get yourself as far as possible from the physical places where you would usually do that.
So I love that tip. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I also want to add this little reminder here that when you are outside, you don't have to be exercising. And I feel like when we were kids, we would play outside, we would be with friends. And then somehow when you grow up, especially I think for women, it's like outdoors means I am running, or outdoors means I am doing a walk, right? And there's nothing in between. But you can take your podcast and knitting and sit outside in a blanket in your backyard if you need to get outside of the house. It doesn't always have to be, oh, if I'm outside, I'm moving. Whatever happened to laying out like on a blanket and listening to music and like calling a friend, or sitting on a back porch and like in a rocking chair doing whatever you want to do? Like that counts as getting out of the house. You don't have to be on this like massive exercise expedition to enjoy nature.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a back porch and you need to walk a little bit to get to a park, fine. But again, call yourself out. Be honest with yourself about what you're doing. When you get to the park, sit down, look at the ducks, look at the dogs.
You are allowed to sit down outside. I think this is going to be groundbreaking news for people. Give it a shot. Seriously.
Yes.
Give it a shot. I got really passionate about that.
But you're right. You're right. It was a great reminder. Do we have extra ideas for distractions?
I would just say when it comes to distraction, it can also turn into me time, which is kind of nice. And the more unique to you and the more exciting it is to you, I feel like the better. Like I once asked someone what their favorite distractions were. I think I put it on my Instagram, and someone came back to me and was like, I like lying on a blanket outside listening to crime shows, and that's my distraction. And I was like, I love that you're so specific, and that's very prescriptive for you. And I think it's kind of fun to get into that about yourself. It's kind of eye-opening. And I guess when it comes to distraction also, you have to keep trying things and find out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try one distraction and you're like, it didn't work, you got to be open to trying multiple distractions.
Here are a few more that some of my clients like: painting your nails and like doing nail art.
That's a fun one. Yeah.
Because you have to be really focused. Like, I mean, I need to be really focused when I do my nail. She says, I don't know when the last time was that I did my nails, but you know what I mean? Like if you do it, you kind of have to think about what you're doing it. And especially if you do like extra fancy things on it, that's a good one. I like that one. That's one that we've discussed this week with a client.
That could be a recovery collective coping skills group, is nail art. That would be a fun topic.
That would be fun.
We would need someone to help us guide that though, because I would not be the person for that.
Yeah, I have no idea how to do that. So
anything else?
Spending time with a pet, playing with a cute little dog, cuddling your cat. I mean, it depends on the character of the cat and the dog, but you know what I mean? If you have a kiddo, it might also be, I mean, it's weird to say it like that, but you could play with them. They tend to be very good at capturing people's attention. So that could be one. And I also wanted to say the one we started out with, which is talk to someone, like have a conversation. Don't forget that you don't ever have to, like, that doesn't have to mean you have to speak. You can also just like call someone and be like, how you doing? And just listen. That's totally cool. So always give yourself, the chill version of that option as a possibility. People love to talk about their lives. So don't feel like that means you have to come to them and be like, I'm struggling right now, and sort of like explain and blah, blah. Maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you just need someone to distract you, and that's perfectly fine.
Right. That's a really good reminder, because when you reach out for help, you don't have to be like, I need help, I'm struggling right now. It can just be like, how's your day going? And then helping yourself by breaking out of that mindset. That's as much as you needed from that person. So, yeah.
And if you're trying to think of like, what kind of person could I call in order for us to have a conversation so I'm engaged? Because I tend to disconnect from the conversation when I don't talk, because that was my problem in the past. Aim for people that you're doing something with in a completely different context. What I mean by that is, say you've got a vacation planned in 6 months' time, call that person. Hey, do we have the tickets? Blah, blah, blah. Have you looked at that town? You're both going to be talking and you're going to be engaged because it's something you're doing together. If you're at uni and you're working on a project, or that there's this class or this event going on, call someone that is related to that to talk about that. You'll both have things to say. Like, try to think of things that, like, humans and happenings in your life where that could lead to like a two-way conversation. If you are afraid that if it's like only one way and they speak to you, you're still kind of stuck in your head, because I know that feeling and it's really distressing. And then I would hate myself for not having listened properly and not being present, blah, blah, blah. I want to avoid you adding a layer of judgment at the end of doing the distraction thing. So
I like that one. All right. Well, I feel like we've covered a pretty good amount about distraction. There's so many things that can be a form of distraction. It's actually really fun to explore. So comment below what distractions you like best to help the other viewers with their suggestions or with their ideas. So, all right. And Claire, this has been lovely. I appreciate you. You are the best ever.
Oh, thank you. You are the most, what's the word? I want a flowery word. You're the mostest of the mostest, the most fabulous, the most excellent of all the humans.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish, now that that's recorded, I'll just replay that one for myself.
Sounds good.
Okay, everyone. I hope you all have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Bye.